Hello friends, do you remember the Ron Paul Revolution, circa 2007-8? The reason I ask is because there's a lot of us, especially people around my age, where this was an introduction for us into questioning what we thought we knew about the government and money and war and media and politics and so many things. And this came up in a recent Bonversation, so I thought, I'm curious to know. How many of the viewers here on John the Bon YouTube channel remember 2007? How many of us were influenced by this stuff? Let's take a look at this clip from Ron Paul. He's at the 2007 Republican primary debate, and this is on Fox News. Let's take a look at this.
Congressman Paul, I believe you are the only man on the stage who opposes the war in Iraq, who would bring the troops home as quickly as almost immediately, sir. Are you out of step with your...
And keep in mind here that this is 2007, so the Iraq war, or those Middle East wars, they were 2002-3 that they began. So this is only a few years after that war had started. Of course, we found out, or we know from benefit of hindsight, that that so-called war lasted many more years. But at this time, it was only a few years into that whole Middle East conflict, that particular version of it.
Is your party out of step with the rest of the world? If either of those is the case, why are you seeking its nomination?
Well, I think the party has lost its way because the conservative wing of the Republican Party always advocated a non-interventionist foreign policy. Senator Robert Taft didn't want to be in NATO. George Bush won the election in year 2000 campaigning on a humble foreign policy, no nation building, no policing of the world. Republicans were elected to end the Korean War. The Republicans were elected to end the Vietnam War. There's a strong tradition of being anti-war in the Republican Party. It is the constitutional position. It is the advice of the founders to follow a non-interventionist foreign policy. Stay out of entangling alliances. Be friends with countries.
Now, some of you watching this might be thinking, JLB, you don't even believe in these so-called wars, so why is this important? Like I said earlier, for a lot of us back then, 2007-8, around that time, that was when we were first exposed to this idea that maybe we're being lied to about the real reasons for war. Maybe the countries are better off not going to these wars. Remember, I'm from Australia, so Australia was part of the operation, whatever they called it, Iraqi freedom or something, I can't even remember. So, remember, back then I was very young, and I believed the official story, up to and including September 11, but this guy, Ron Paul, and the revolution, the online revolution that surrounded him, got people like me, and there was lots of us, questioning things like the Federal Reserve or central banks, the money system in general. Where does the money come from? Who's in charge of it? What's their real agenda? It was the Ron Paul revolution that got a lot of us looking into this back in the day.
Negotiate and talk with them and trade with them. Just think of the tremendous improvement relationships with Vietnam. We lost 60,000 men. We came home in defeat. Now we go over there and invest in Vietnam. So there's a lot of merit to the advice of the founders and following the Constitution. And my argument is that we shouldn't go to war so carelessly. When we do, the wars don't end.
So I saw this when I was a young man. I would have been about 19 years old, maybe 20 when this happened. I saw this and I thought, this guy's making a lot of sense actually. And then what happens next?
Congressman, you don't think that changed with the 9/11 attack, sir?
What changed?
The non-interventionist policies.
No, non-intervention was a major contributing factor. Have you ever read about the reasons they attacked us? They attack us because we've been over there. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. We've been in the Middle East. I think Reagan was right. We don't understand the irrationality of Middle Eastern politics. So right now we're building an embassy in Iraq that's bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico? We would be objecting. We need to look at what we do from the perspective of what would happen if somebody else did it to us.
Are you suggesting we invited the 9/11 attack, sir?
I'm suggesting that we listen to the people who attacked us and the reason they did it. And they are delighted that we're over there because Osama bin Laden has said, I am glad you're over on our sand because we can target you so much easier. They have already now, since that time, have killed 3,400 of our men, and I don't think it was necessary.
Wendell, may I make a comment?
So he didn't get much of a response from it. There's a live audience at this time. And again, remember the context here. Back in 2007, I still believed, Osama bin Laden and these terrorists and all of these kinds of things. But even within that framework, here's a guy saying, yeah, if you send troops over there, then they're more easy for the enemies to kill, and you're incentivizing those same people to send more people to kill us. So why would we do that? And the founding fathers were against this kind of thing. So why is this party doing this? I'm against it, I oppose it. And so I thought this was all very sensible, and he got almost no crowd reaction. But then what happened next, I still remember watching this for the first time back in 2007. I remember it like it was yesterday. Watch what happens next.
On that, that's really an extraordinary statement. It's an extraordinary statement as someone who lived through the attack of September 11, that we invited the attack because we were attacking Iraq. I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11.
And then the applause for what Rudy Giuliani just said goes on for like 30 seconds, which might not sound like much, but it's just rapturous applause for what this guy just said. He's like, well, I'm the mayor. I was the mayor of New York, and as someone who lived through it, this guy, what he's saying, I've never heard anything so absurd in my life. And then the crowd erupts into rapturous applause. And I was watching this as a very young man thinking, what the hell is going on here? So I looked further into this Ron Paul character, and then I started learning about the Federal Reserve and where money comes from and who's really behind it. And why do we have inflation? Who's behind inflation? And then I discovered this Zeitgeist film and Loose Change. And you can kind of imagine the steps from there, right? So anyway, I was talking about this exact thing, Ron Paul, in the most recent Bonversation, which you can access right now. It's a 1-hour conversation. Link in the info box below. I was chatting with a gentleman who is a writer on Substack. That's where I found him. So he's not a podcaster, but if you listen to him, you might think to yourself, this guy could be a podcaster. He speaks very well, but he writes incredibly well. So I wanted to invite him onto the show. And that was earlier today. And I finished editing that and publishing that just a moment ago. So you can access that via bonversations.com or via the John LeBon Podbean. It's available for free. You can stream or download it. Go and check it out. We talk about Ron Paul a little bit, but what we really speak about more is the people that we're surrounded by. And why do they think what they think? And what was really happening during those crazy months and years of the madness circa 2020. So we cover a lot of things. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Go and check it out. Links in the show notes below. And let me know. This guy, Ron Paul, I'm in my mid-30s. Mid to late 30s now. I guess I turned 37 later this year. So I was late teens, early 20s when this Ron Paul revolution was going on. And I remember it very well. I'm curious to know, what do you remember? Were you influenced by this at all? Were you there back in the day of the internet was very different back then. It was a very different place. Do you remember those days? What do you remember about it? Let me know in the comments section below, and I look forward to reading your responses. And check those links in the comments to the latest conversation. I think you'll enjoy it.